Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Multimusic Technology and Surface Pro Audio. It's that time again. Microsoft have released, or are about to release, a new Surface Pro. And so it's time again to think about, oh my goodness, what's that going to mean? Is it more? Is it less? Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? Is it going to fumble it? Is it going to give a smooth, fantastic, creative awesomeness of music production? Or is it just going to be a little office machine that we're going to have fun on? Who knows? We don't know until we try it, which has always been my philosophy here at Surface Pro Audio, is that we don't know until we try. And over these past years, since the Surface Pro 3, I've been kicking out videos trying to demonstrate what the Surface Pro range of products is capable of. And as always, all I can give you is what I do. So I run music software, I check it out, I test it, I look at performance, I look at tweaking, all those sorts of things. I offer that up on YouTube as a guide to whether you can or cannot run music software and hardware on the Surface Pro. Currently with the Surface Pro 6, this little thing's been running pretty brilliantly. I've got a nice little USB audio interface plugged into it, I've got a MIDI keyboard, I can play synthesizers that I can adjust with my fingers, or map to MIDI, that kind of thing. It's quite and completely capable of running Ableton Live, Bitwig, Cubase, Pro Tools, Reaper, all the lovely little bits of software, desktop software that you want to use. Because this is no iPad. It's not an iPad, it's a proper computer. It runs Windows 10, proper Windows 10, running all of your plugins, your virtual instruments, your software, whatever it is that you want to do. It can run it because it's a computer, a Windows computer, yeah? So that's the point. That's why I'm into the whole Surface thing, because it's a beautiful form factor, sits really well, and has masses of potential for creative input, whether it's via pen, whether it's by fingers, mouse, keyboard, however you want to address it is entirely up to you. However, the caveat with all this is that we don't actually have any idea whether it's going to work until you actually try it. Because as with all Windows laptops, they are full of hardware which doesn't give a monkey's about music production, doesn't give anything about low latency audio and that sort of throughput that we need for the sort of things that we're doing. It's all about games, it's all about media, it's all about streaming, internet and office software. And that's fine, that's what most people are doing, but not us. We need something a little bit extra. And you cannot assume that any sort of laptop or hybrid or tablet or anything running Windows is just going to be able to do it. You can't. It has to be tested. And I'm the person who does that. I do the testing and I can let you know whether it works or not. So, to come back around, Microsoft has announced not one, but two, well actually a whole bunch of different Surface products, but there's a couple of them in particular that I'm interested in. And so I'm going to need to dig out all my tests and run the whole gamut of stuff to see exactly what it's capable of and if it's suitable for music production. Now we know in the history of all these services that I've tested is that the answer to that question is mostly yes. We had a bit of trouble with the Surface Pro 4 back in the day, but that ended up resolving itself eventually and we got around the issues. It's always dependent on what you're doing and it also depends on your level of expectations. Because the Surface range is a hybrid computer. It has a processor inside that's always trying to save power. And that will save you battery, and that will enable you to sort of hibernate and then open stuff up again. It's really useful for a mobile working environment. It's rubbish for music production. So I have to get in there, tweak a few things, adjust Windows a little bit and get it running properly so it can cope with long, extended periods of time of running audio software and plugins without shutting itself down and glitching. But we've accomplished that so far. So when a new one comes out, I have to go back through all the tests and just to see whether that's possible. So here we are. We're here a week or two before the release of the Surface Pro 7, and so I just wanted to have a very brief conversation about is that going to be any good and what are my plans for it? Well, as far as the Surface Pro 7 goes, yeah, I think it'll probably be fine. I have to test it. I can't actually say until I've tested it, but on the surface of it, it looks fine. So what's different about this one? Where are we getting to now? Well, probably the biggest change is that it's now a quad core. Well, at least it can be, although it could have done before. All right, just rewind a second. The one that I'm interested in, the one that I've gone for all the way down the line, is the i5 8GB version. That's the one that for me hits that perfect point of value, price and performance. If you go for the real high-end i7, you'll get more CPU performance, but you'll also get more heat, and that's something else that we deal with. It's also very expensive. So if you're looking for what I would call the sweet spot, I believe that to be the i5 8GB. You don't need masses of memory. I don't think I've ever hit a memory limit in all the music that I've made on Surfaces. I always hit the CPU limit first. So while the 16GB version of the i5, which there is quite attractive, I'm going to doggedly stay at that 8GB. And that gives me a better comparison to the Surface Pro 6, because those sorts of comparisons are important and useful as well. But otherwise, as far as the hardware goes, it's an extremely similar and familiar story. One little extra, which is that we've got an extra USB port. It has a USB-C as well as a USB-A-B thingy. So a regular USB port, which is what it's had all the time, which has got connected here to a hub so I can use more than one thing, of course. Now we have an extra USB-C port, which probably means now I'll have to run 2 hubs, or means I can run 2 hubs, potentially connect more stuff together, or not have any hubs at all if I had any hardware that actually used USB-C, which of course I don't. But anyway, there's potential there, which is great. The downside is, in order to put that port in there, they've taken out the display port. That's a bit of a thing, because I use my Surface for videos and projections as well. I mean, I guess you could use some kind of Miracast or some other connection, or you could use it with the dock, which does have DisplayPort outputs. But it's just a slight inconvenience, I find. It makes it a more complete machine if you've also got a video output. So you don't have to mess about with all this magic Miracasting kind of nonsense. It's only nonsense because I haven't really done that, so I'll have to find out all about that sort of thing. But otherwise, the specifications are fairly similar. For the processor, we now have another next generation of Intel processor. You've got the i3 dual core, then you've got an i5 quad core, so that's going to be new. This is only a dual core, so going for the i5 8GB on the Surface Pro 7 is going to up, or rather double, the core count. So that's interesting. And there's an i7 quad core, up to 16GB of RAM. The Surface Pro 7 still has a headphone socket for whatever use that may be, and it has a mini SD card slot. I've pretty much got every confidence that the Surface Pro 7 is going to do a fine job. And so I'm putting in my order for one this week, and hopefully I should get it by the end of the month, and we'll be able to start checking that out. The important thing will be whether Windows can be kept under control. Can you keep the processor from filing around too much and causing glitches? And then I'll get down to how many plugins can it run, what sort of software can it run, and the sort of response you can expect to get. But unless something has gone seriously wrong in the hardware, I'm not expecting any surprises. The Surface Pro X, that's a bit of a different matter. Now that was a surprise. I wasn't expecting a kind of a sideways tangent into a new machine. Is it a new machine? Is it not a new machine? Is it different? Is it better? Is it worse? Quite tricky to work that one out. Price-wise, that sits very similar to the Surface Pro 7. So you've got a Surface Pro 7 and a Surface Pro X. The X sounds like it's the more exciting one because it's got an X on it. It has things like this built-in flat pen that sits into the keyboard that folds up. That's quite nice. The screen is slightly larger. Smaller bezels around the outside. Ooh, that's quite interesting. It's got 2, I think, USB ports in the side, USB 3 ports. Ooh, so on initial looking, the Surface Pro X looks pretty tasty. Now what you have to understand about the Surface Pro X is that it runs on an ARM processor. Now this is a Microsoft processor. It's a processor that Microsoft and Qualcomm, whoever it is, have got together to forge their own processor. It's quite exciting really, I suppose. But ultimately, that really means it's a phone. It's a phone processor in there. I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying that it's that kind of technology that hopes to give it masses of battery life. And they're also building in phone network, whatever it's called, connection, so it can connect to the internet when it's out and about roaming around the place. And so the sort of the idea and the design about it comes from that very mobile, very phone market. Now what does that mean in terms of music software? Well, the first thing we have to understand is that it won't be running a regular copy of Windows, because Windows is written for Intel desktop technology, and AMD as well, sure, but it's written for that set of technologies that runs desktop computers and laptops the world over. When you introduce a new technology like ARM, Windows has to be written to use it, has to be changed to use it. And Microsoft have been running a version of Windows on ARM for a little while, and it's really starting to come on, but there are some problems that we are going to encounter. So strictly speaking, in order to take full advantage of the ARM technology, you have to tailor and write your software to run specifically on Windows for ARM. However, regular desktop software should also be able to run, but it can only run in 32-bit mode. So these are Win32-bit apps. So it should be able to run Ableton Live 32-bit, it just can't run the 64-bit version, which means Cubase, which I think is 64-bit only, that ain't going to happen. That also means that the 8 gigs or 16 gigs of RAM that you've bought with your Surface Pro X are not going to be accessible to your 32-bit software, because 32-bit software can only address up to a maximum of 4 gigabytes of RAM. The other potential snag in it all is that in order to install hardware, the drivers have to be baked into Windows itself. So any manufacturer that requires you to run an installer in order to install their driver, that's probably not going to work. Though having said that, we did get around a similar sort of situation with Windows S on the Surface Go. So I wonder if there are workarounds, ways of sneaking drivers into the system. We don't know. We don't know until we try. So while the Surface Pro X looks fantastic, has this great thin pen thing, the largest screen, light, marvellous battery life, mobile phone network connections, we don't actually know what it's going to be able to run. And so, you know, on the surface of it, it doesn't look like the best choice. However, it all depends. So my plan is to get hold of one of those and to run a bunch of tests as well to see whether keyboards will be installed, audio interfaces, can you get them plugged in? Can you get the latency down? What are the audio drivers like? And can it become a useful music production tool? I mean, that is the other thing. They have removed the headphone sockets. So if you're trying to use the onboard audio, I don't know what you do. You'll have to get some Bluetooth headphones. Oh, look, handily, Microsoft have also released some Bluetooth earbuds. So I guess that's the solution right there. Will they work with ASIO for all? Who knows? Who knows? So we have exciting days ahead. We're not sure exactly what's going to happen. Let's leave it at that, shall we? So to summarise, Surface Pro 7 is out in a week or two. I'm going to get hold of one of those. I'll run my usual tests, and I imagine it's pretty much going to be just as good as the Surface Pro 6, and hopefully a little bit better. We like to get a little bit more performance, a little bit more of something for our money. That would be good. Surface Pro X, which is coming along a couple of weeks after that, I'm hoping to be able to borrow one of those to do a bit of testing on that as well. And I imagine some stuff is going to work and some stuff isn't. But hopefully I'll be able to give you an idea of how the performance of the Surface Pro X compares to the Surface Pro 7, and you can make your mind up based on that. So there you go. That's the plan. We'll get there. You might have to give me a bit of time, and I can't do these things instantly, so I'll get the Surface Pro at the end of the month. You know, give us a few weeks, but hopefully before Christmas, November, December time, I'll be able to report back on my findings. I mean, obviously, you know, follow me on Instagram or wherever, and I'll be throwing out ideas and tests as we go along until I pull it all together into a proper kind of performance video. And if you want all that real insider, direct contact sort of information, then consider joining us on Patreon and throwing me a couple of quid so I can keep these videos rolling and keep investing in all the gear so that I can test it so that you know what's going on with it. That's the idea anyway. But in the meantime, we'll make some tunes.